I ran a tabletop game with just 3 rules. Roll a d8, and if it's 5 or higher, you succeed. If you fail, the situation changes. You get 3 stats: mental, physical, and social. And that's it. It's called the Great System, and the whole thing fits on a bookmark. But is it great, actually? Or is there a reason that most tabletop games have more than 3 rules? I lured some friends to my house with the promise of free snacks so we could find out. I mostly play D&D, which has kind of a lot of rules, the way that grandmas in the Midwest have kind of a lot of Precious Moments figurines. D&D has rules for everything from how long you can hold your breath, to how to harvest poison from a creature's corpse, to how your warhorse will stop loving you if you stop being a paladin. Okay, that last one was just first edition, but I really think we should bring it back. The point is, D&D has a lot of rules, and because I'm so into role-playing and storytelling, and math makes me feel like my brain is melting out my ears, people often suggest that I would prefer a less crunchy game. But so far, I just haven't loved the rules-light games that I've played. So why am I playing this one then? Because I think even a group as argumentative as the tabletop community can still agree that this is about as rules-light as it gets. Although last week I got corrected for saying that fantasy is a genre, so you never know. I learned about this system in a blog post from one of the creators of the Great System, H. Tucker Covey. In this blog post, they talk about playing other games not to replace the games you love, but to improve them. Covey encourages readers to play like a game designer, which unfortunately does not mean inventing new kinds of dice and developing a god complex. It means, quote, play this game and see what rules you wish you had. See what rules you miss from D&D. Then go back and play D&D again. This time though, think about all of the rules you're interacting with. How many of them are necessary? Which is honestly a great question. There was no part of me that thought I'm gonna abandon D&D and just play the Great System forever now, but I was curious about how stripping tabletop games down to their bones might show me what it is about D&D that I love so much, and what other games I might love too. Maybe the problem I have with other rules-light games isn't that they have fewer mechanics, just fewer of the ones I want. It's like, do I really love salad, or do I just love croutons? Because that could really open the door to stuff like soup and bruschetta. It's tough to discuss the Great System, written by H. Tucker Covey and Elizabeth Snow, without revealing its complete rule set, since the rules are so simple. Covey actually includes the full text of the rules for free in their blog post about it. But if you're interested in the system and want it in a nice printable format, you can buy it for $4.99 on itch.io at the link in the description. And even leave a tip if, for example, you are talking about it in a video on your YouTube channel. Seems like the least you could do. This game is for 1 to 4 players with an optional additional player to fill the role of Game Master, or MC. So yes, you can play it as a GM-less RPG, although I did not. Every player needs 1 8-sided die, and if you think that makes me sad, wait until you learn that the MC doesn't use dice at all. Each player controls a character, and each character has 3 stats: physical, mental, and social. You get a standard array of 2, 1, and 0 modifiers, which you can apply to those 3 stats however you like. Whenever a character does something, or tries to avoid something, they roll that 8-sided die and add whatever stat seems appropriate. The MC is never rolling against players. If I want something to happen to them, they're the ones who roll to see if they can avoid it. Statistically, this means that every roll has anywhere from 50 to 75% chance of succeeding. For context, in 5th edition D&D, assuming a medium difficulty task with a DC of 15, a character with a +0 modifier has only a 30% chance of success. And even with a +5, which is what you get if you build your entire personality around being good at this one thing, that only goes up to 55%. That's slightly better than a coin flip. That's like a coin flip if you bribed the coin first with another coin. What this means is that players are much more likely to succeed using the Great System. But when they do fail, the rules are pretty explicit. That failure should change the circumstances, but should not make the characters look foolish, unless they choose to look foolish on their own, which my players seem to really enjoy. That's all the rules. You can tell whatever kind of story you want, with whatever kinds of characters you want, in whatever world you want. All of that is up to you. You could use this to play superheroes saving the world, gods wrestling for power, or children unionizing against their babysitter. In my case, I pitched 3 concepts to players and let them choose what they felt excited about: pirates following a treasure map, a troupe of performers on a dangerous airship journey, or students at an adventurer's school trying to steal the answer key to the final exam. In other words, doubloons, drama, or delinquency. What they chose right after today's sponsor. Recently, I was thinking, I wish my tabletop games had more table. You know, I have a pretty big table, but I also have too many D&D accessories and the need to game during dinner dinner, and 2 cats that want to be directly on top of whatever we're paying attention to. That's why I was so excited about this week's sponsor, Tabletop Table. It's a foldable, portable tabletop, so you always have what you need for your games no matter where you are. But that wasn't enough for me. I needed more tables. So I made this one, a table to categorize all the accessories you can get on the Tabletop Table Kickstarter. Every table comes with 2 each of the card trays and dice bowls, which attach to a magnetic rail. You can get more as add-ons, plus there are table extenders if you need more room, you little Twilight Imperium playing freaks. If they hit the next stretch goal, everybody will get their choice of reversible tabletopper with their table. Now you might be asking, how much we talking here? Can I get one of these under the table for cheaper? And no, it's a tabletop. It can't go under, obviously. But trust me, you want the real thing. If you can't swing the Relic, which is beautifully crafted from solid walnut, you should check out the Hexlite, which is a more budget-friendly option, and still cool as hell. I know it's tempting to table this discussion, but we really can't. Go to tabletoptable.com/Ginny as soon as you can, because the Kickstarter ends in just 5 days, and if you miss your chance to lock in your 10% discount, you're gonna flip a table, and nobody wants that. Welcome back. Don't worry, I'll stop saying the word table now. For this game, my players included me at the helm, my husband Josh, and my friend Laura, all of whom play mostly D&D but have tried a scattering of other systems. There was also Morgan, who plays a ton of different systems, and Jesse, who plays primarily D&D but has also designed a few rules-light systems himself, including one last week that I criticized for having too many puns. And when that's coming from me, you know there's a problem. Out of the game options I suggested, they chose piracy, so I jotted down a quick page of notes with some basic encounter concepts and we jumped right in. They created their characters, just some regular human pirates, and chose their roles on the ship, which they christened the Booty Implication. It's fine, I knew what I was signing up for when I invited this group to play. The game opens with the crew already aboard their ship, chasing after a legendary treasure with only half a map, which is, statistically speaking, not the ideal number of map. They're after the hoard of the famous Captain Ursula Whiplash Crow, who vanished centuries ago along with her ship and her treasure. Naturally, the first thing that happens is a violent storm, which turns out to be magically summoned by a gang of octopus-tailed merfolk, or as my players referred to them, hentai maids. Once the storm clears, they arrive at the island of Plague Tide. Clearly not a great vacation spot, judging by the name. Legend says anyone who sets foot on its shores dies of a horrific disease, and sure enough, the party is greeted by a welcome committee of plague-ridden undead. They also find the wreckage of Captain Crow's ship, the Salted Cutlass, which contains the other half of the map and some unsettling clues about what went down on the island. This leads to a delightful to-do list: comfort some ghosts with unresolved trauma, swing by a creepy statue to pick up Captain Crow's still-beating heart, and then head to the underground tunnel maze where the treasure is hidden. Down in the tunnels, they meet the undead horror Captain Crow herself, who climbs the walls like a spider, lashes out with her whip, and spreads plague with her touch. Always use protection, kids. When the crew finally puts her down for good, the curse is broken, the plague lifts, and they use her skull as a key to open the treasure vault. Inside, a mountain of golden jewels and probably at least one cursed amulet. It's actually kind of wild that they didn't check when you think about it. We had a lot of fun, but it's easy to have fun hanging out with your friends. The real question is, did we have fun because of the game or despite it? Overall, we were all surprised by how well the game worked for having only 3 rules. Seriously, it had no business being that functional. But there were 3 key features that we all really felt the lack of. First, hit points, or some way of tracking damage. As the MC, I treated combat like a movie. I described outcomes based on whether the roll succeeded and how that would realistically affect someone. So if Captain Crow's whip connected, I would say that it opened a wound across their back, blood soaking through their shirt. If a player rolled well to decapitate a zombie, the head went flying and the zombie was down. But when it came to player character damage, things got murky. My players were deeply uncomfortable not knowing what risks they were taking. Like, okay, they got whipped. Are they fine? Are they action hero fine or hospital drama fine? Can they take another hit or 2? At what point do I start describing a cinematic death scene? Without a mechanic for tracking health or even knowing if character death is possible, every combat felt like playing chicken with an invisible line. And since that line existed only in my head, it felt totally unfair to cross it. So effectively, no one could die. Congrats, you have received accidental immortality. Also, even in a boss battle, a player can just say, I cut her head off, roll the die, and there's a 50 to 75% chance that it just works, which is fantastic, I guess, if you want your players to feel like unstoppable anime protagonists, but terrible if you're trying to build tension. It makes every enemy feel equally killable, from a lowly skeleton to an ancient undead sea captain. There is no mechanical difference between a minion and a final boss. I worked around this with a few clever tricks, like establishing that the captain captain couldn't be truly killed until her still-beating heart was shoved back into her chest and destroyed. But a simple hit point system would have been a huge help. Speaking of combat, the second problem we ran into was a lack of combat-specific rules. Now, to be fair, this is at least partially on me. My D&D saturated brain is trained to assume that any group of players left unsupervised for more than 10 minutes will try to stab something. If we'd been playing a game about navigating the social landmines of a Regency-era ball, or if our pirates had been forming a union and demanding dental instead of hunting treasure, we might not have noticed the issue at all. But since we did do a fair amount of fighting, it just got old fast to roll physical checks over and over. Even though the players were being creative with their descriptions of what they were doing, under the hood it was always the same math. Every turn was describe something cool, roll the same die, add the same stat, shrug at the same result. There was no real incentive to try anything clever. You could somersault through a chandelier while hurling a dagger with your teeth, or you could just say, I stab it, and the roll would be the same either way. So a lot of the time, they just stabbed it. Plus, anyone who didn't prioritize physical was at a distinct disadvantage here. Jesse's character prioritized mental, and he managed to cobble together a few attacks that could plausibly count as brain damage, but Morgan's poor social-focused character had nothing. All she could really do was repeat her weakest skill over and over, or try to flirt a zombie to death, which, to be fair, was just as likely to succeed as anything else. Really, this was a problem with all the abilities. A skill issue, as the youths would say. Physical, mental, and social does effectively cover everything you need to play, but it gets repetitive very quickly once you start rolling. At a certain point, it felt almost like it was punishing creativity by making every good idea mechanically identical to a bad one. For me, it really drove home how valuable D&D's class system is. It gives each character their own lane, full of stuff that they're uniquely good at. I think this is especially important in games like this with more than one player, because if every character can do all the same things, it's hard for each character to feel distinct and valuable, and players who aren't as proactive can easily get sidelined. It's less about balance and more about identity. The third problem was more of a headache for me than for the players, but I didn't love that everything had the same difficulty. For example, Josh tried to convince the Octomaids that he was one of them and had lost his tentacles thanks to a curse. There is no mechanical way to distinguish between I climb a rope and I gaslight the octopus women into thinking that I'm their long-lost, tentacleless cousin. Both are the same role. In D&D, I would have called for a deception check, slapped on a high DC, probably disadvantage, and if he pulled it off, the whole table would have cheered like they just robbed a casino. But in this system, my options were either say no, like a humorless grouch, or let him roll and, thanks to math, probably succeed. I let him roll, he succeeded, and just like that, my terrifying tentacled monsters were downgraded to gullible idiots. This just meant that the game spiraled into nonsense immediately, which to be fair is not unusual for this group, but in this system there's no real middle ground. Either you roll for everything and the game gets absurd fast, or you gatekeep rolls based on plausibility and it turns into the mom says no game. The success-failure mechanic is so binary that you're pushed towards one of two extremes. Either the players feel unstoppable or they feel shut down, which makes it harder to live in that sweet spot where the dice are agents of chaos that occasionally inject nonsense into a world that otherwise takes itself pretty seriously. Of course, bookmark to 400-page rulebook is a huge leap. There are so many places to fall on that spectrum. It's not like we have to pick one or the other. Plus, choosing a tabletop game is not like getting married. You can play D&D one day and play the great system the next day. It's not like D&D is gonna find out and leave divorce papers and their ring on the kitchen table for you to find. I did find this exercise useful. For one thing, it helped me realize why I bounced off a particular rules-light game that I'd played before. It had a very casual relationship with combat. Like, don't worry about it, man, kind of casual. And it turns out I do worry about it. I like a robust combat system. Shocking news, I'm sure, from someone who always carries a sword. But it also just reminded me why I like structure so much in general. I don't find a detailed rule set like D&D to be restrictive. It's the opposite for me. A solid framework really inspires my creativity. It doesn't feel like a cage to me, it's more like a jungle gym that I get to play on. And honestly, a solid set of rules keeps the game fair. If character death is on the table, but there's no clear way to get to that outcome, you're basically just hoping that your GM is in a good mood that day. And I'll be the first to admit, I am not always in a neutral mood. I am large, I contain multitudes. 1 part ruthless god, 3 parts anxious raccoon. I like the rules that keep the god and or raccoon in check. If I wanted to just sit down with my friends and tell a story together, we could do that. We wouldn't need to roll dice or follow rules, we could just make up whatever sounded interesting. I was a nerdy kid, trust me, I've done exactly that to the tune of tens of thousands of deeply embarrassing words that I truly truly hope are lost to time. But we're not just telling a story, we're playing a game. And the difference between a story and a game is mechanics. It turns out I'm basically a 4-year-old. I thrive on structure, consistency, and clear rules. And if I don't get a healthy snack and a 20-minute afternoon nap, I will make it everyone's problem. You know, I originally clicked on that blog post feeling irritable and defensive because it had a title that I've seen over and over again on social media and in my own video comments. You know the one. I'm begging D&D players to play another game. In the blog post, Kobe acknowledges how ineffective this mindset is when trying to convince someone to try different systems. Personally, if someone opens by belittling me and insulting my hobbies, I get an immediate +5 bonus to stubbornness. The thing about that sentence is that it feels an awful lot like people are saying it not to try and improve my gameplay experience, but to feel superior and pass judgment. I often see people talking as if the only reason to prefer D&D to other systems is ignorance. Some folks cannot process the idea that someone might try other games and still come back to D&D because, scandalously, they enjoy it. In the end, what convinced me to try out the grade system wasn't being accused of having fun the wrong way. It was Kobe's suggestion that you don't play other games to replace the one you like, but to understand why you like it. And look, I do think trying other systems can be fun and eye-opening. I have always thought that, and I've tried plenty of games that I don't talk about on this channel because I don't much feel like making videos called "I tried X system and it was fine, I guess." But I also hold what is apparently a deeply controversial opinion. If you're playing a game for fun and you're having fun, you're fine. You don't need to earn it. You don't have to unlock the achievement for comprehensive indie game education before you're allowed to enjoy the dragon game. Sure, maybe there's a system out there that you would like more. And if you want to go looking, amazing. Try stuff, learn things. But it should be your decision, not something that you get shamed into by strangers. We are under so much pressure in every area of life to constantly optimize and improve and upgrade, but there can be real peace in just treating your hobby like a hobby. That's it. Thanks for coming to my TED Talk. If you want to try out the grade system yourself, I highly recommend buying it at the link in the description. And if you're gonna leave a comment reprimanding me for playing D&D, I require it. Forward me a purchase confirmation email before leaving a judgmental comment, or I'll see you in court, buddy. By the way, if you enjoy D&D and you're interested in a system with a similar style and level of complexity, you might be into Daggerheart. I have a video about it right here. I forgot which side to point to for a second, where you can check out the character creation system and see if it's something that you want to learn more about.